I'm Diana Montalion. I am a systems architect, which means I design relationships between software parts. I'm also the founder of Mentix Group, and our goal is to share information and experience and knowledge so that we're able to work together to design systems that do what we need them to do. One of the challenges that we often experience is silos, or a fight between product and tech, or a disconnect between business goals and the goals of the software system. And so architecting knowledge flow is about architecting how we think well together in order to be able to architect better systems. Conway's law says that organizations are going to design systems that mirror the communication structure of the organization. And so because I usually work in transforming a system or modernizing a system, often what organizations do is they try and keep the same way of thinking and the same way of communicating, the same way of sharing knowledge, while hoping to get a very different system out of it. And that fails, and it fails, and it's miserable, and it's painful. And so what I'm trying to do is figure out what to do about that. Like, what are the skills we need or the practices that we need that can help us to design the system by designing conceptual integrity in how we decide what actions to take, what ideas to prioritize. So often we have software systems that are many good but uncoordinated ideas, and relational complexity is increasing so fast that it just means that our software systems become legacy 3 minutes after we push them to production. And so as we move into greater relational complexity, meaning that more software is interacting with more software, we need a different approach to designing those relationships and those systems. People often ask me, okay, so what do you do when you come into an organization that wants to move away from their legacy system or design better relationships or decouple or APIs or event streams or microservices? Unfortunately, the answer is it depends. There are some patterns that improve most information systems, but the way a particular group of people are thinking about those patterns, the way they're prioritizing what matters will be different. And so when I come in to begin to improve knowledge flow and systems design, first thing I do is listen for pain, because the pain that each individual has while they're trying to do what they're trying to do will point me towards the parts of the system that aren't in good relationship to each other. And as that starts to become clear, what I'm looking for is a leverage point, a place to make a change that will have big impact. That's harder than coming in and saying, oh, you have this problem. If you apply this patch, it'll be gone. Donella Meadows says that basically you have to dance with systems. You have to listen to them in order to know how to intervene. So the first thing I usually do is observe and listen and ask. And then places to focus come out of that. And once there's a place to focus, then generally I'm doing things that people think of as architecture, right? Data modeling and those kinds of things that let technology help us improve systems' ability to generate information or whatever its goal is. Not all systems need to be event-driven. So one of the things I'm cautious about is bringing industry best practices into every situation, because then it becomes, if I have a hammer, I'm only looking for nails. I do, though, in the systems I work on, almost always focus on the events. And the reason that matters is that software was often designed in a context. So to make videos or publish videos, for example. And now that we live in a world where there's so much relation between different platforms and people might interact with a video, for example, on TikTok, which would be different than the longer version that might be elsewhere. And so when an organization is trying to re-architect their system, one of the most impactful ways to think together is, what are the events? What are the capabilities in the system that have to happen? People have to do publish video in order for the system to have its purpose. And usually modeling the events and the information an event would produce and how consumers respond to an event and what they do with the information once they've responded to an event will usually create some better cohesion in the system and allow us to then also design the boundaries in the software, create more self-organizing teams. So it's not a magic bullet, but when we think about what a software system does, the events are actually what brings it to life. It's the beating heart of a system. And so it allows software parts to communicate with each other, but it also lets people think about what's happening in the system without over-focusing on one point of view like Kafka versus another point of view like revenue. Gaining trust is a great question, because everything for me in an architecture practice, developing trust in the practice is critical to it having any positive impact. The kinds of practices that go with developing systems, they need consent. I develop trust by being focused on, is the idea or the recommendation or the theory that I'm presenting, is it pretty well justified? Have I done due diligence? Have I looked at it from other points of view? Have I asked people with expertise that I don't have? So even if people don't listen, it was still a trustworthy recommendation. And over time, there develops an awareness, this practice actually means that the recommendations or the ideas are pretty trustworthy. That said, it's still a choice, and that often organizations have political issues, behavioral issues, and architecture doesn't fix social problems. We can create opportunities for an improved social system, but there's other things that have to come into play. How people are incentivized, what behaviors are rewarded and what behaviors are not. So there's more to it than just I come in and people listen to everything I say, because that never happens, has never happened in the history of the world, I think. So I focus on creating conceptual integrity, making sure that I'm understanding as best I can, but then partnering with people who are responsible for behavior and politics and political power to try and shift the way that we are rewarded for being productive away from siloing and hostility and saying no to every idea and all of those things that can get really entrenched in a culture if they've been under stress for a while. Also, being friendly doesn't hurt. We really aren't taught or told when we start down the path of software engineering or however we're coming into tech, is that we're going to have to make a case for the things that we need to do because we need money to do them. I mean, most of us have a mortgage to pay. So there is a direct correlation between business goals and revenue and what we're doing. So for me, the process of being able to understand what leadership is thinking, the people responsible for the money, what they're thinking, what they need, and then speaking truth to power, that really trying to offer a solution that is in sync with what the organization actually needs. That's not always what is being asked for. So when I offer an alternative, I need to justify it. And that is that the teams that I work with and work on, there's a lot of trust and cohesion. There's a lot of self-organization. Here I am, things are going on today in the situation I'm working in, and I know it's okay because everyone actually knows how to do what we need to do. So it's shifting away from trying to sort of control or parent a situation and instead create a lot of good ability to leverage all the brilliance that's around me. And so often by the end, we're able to do more of what we think matters to do because we have built sort of a mature trust and understanding in our thinking. And then people worry less about whether or not we need their attention. If we've got this, we've got this. And so it's beneficial to me, but it's usually beneficial to the people around me even more because they're actually able to do hard things without all the noise and the politics that go with it and without feeling overly managed or controlled. So it creates synergy and energy that we need to do hard things. Yeah. I've been 25 plus years as a non-traditional person in tech. What do we do about that? I'm still actually not really sure. I can tell you what works for me, but it may not work for another person. So what I've started to do, I give workshops on systems design, and one of the things we use is the iceberg model. The iceberg model shows us that in systems, the call is always coming from inside the house, right? When we're experiencing an outage in production, there's something in the patterns, structures, and mental models of the way we're working that has given us that outcome. So the goal is to look deeper than the event into the patterns and structures and mental models and shift them and tweak them. So what I've started doing in the workshop is the event is 91.88% of software developers worldwide are male. Go ahead and design that system. You want that outcome. What are the patterns and structures and mental models that you would put in place to generate the fact that at the end, pretty much only males are doing this task? And then we flip it the other way. What if we're designing a system where you cannot tell a software engineer is a software engineer unless they tell you because there's nothing about their external appearance that would indicate that? And once we have these two models, there are patterns. There are things that we see we designed in order to get the first outcome that shifts significantly in the second one. And so this helps us find leverage points. So things like the way that we're educated, things like the change that has happened because there was a fair amount of equality until the 80s and then it started to drop off. We now say, oh, well, that's just because it just is nature. But it isn't actually. There were a number of forces that happened that caused this to shift in that direction. And so understanding that we made all this up. We made up Kafka and Kubernetes and Agile and conferences. And also we've constructed a system that's led to this outcome. And if we don't like that paradigm, then we can build a different system. We can have different mental models and different structures. What doesn't work is to take a non-traditional person like me and put them into the culture and say, go. That fixes it. Because if the culture does not support them, if they're always working against get out, you don't matter, you don't know what you're talking about, then they leave. One of the things I discovered, there were very few women going into, especially in architecture at the enterprise level, but 95% of them 20 years later have left. So it's not even that we're not getting diversity, we're not keeping it either. And so I do think it comes down to changing our assumptions about what skills are involved in building software and including a variety of skills and a variety of cultural approaches that make us more diverse and impactful. And there's a lot of science that supports this. There's a lot of science that said diversity in teams tends to generate more revenue in the outcomes. So we pretty much know that that is true from that point of view. The challenge is it can be a pretty hard sell to the 91.88% of software engineers that it will deliver a better outcome for everyone. if we're not already caring very much about the impact on people of the technology that we build. And so I think those two things would need to happen together, right? That we would introduce the benefit of a diverse team and make that more visible, relatable, understandable. It seems like common sense to me. And simultaneously figure out how that message translates well to the people that have created a culture that self-reinforces itself, that says these are the things that matter, these are the personality traits that matter, and continues to replicate the same type of person doing the work. So I think those things are happening at the same time. Bring in some data, lean into the data. And so I think there are plenty of people in tech who are male, but also wanting to solve this problem. And so continuing to have discussions about how to have impact so that we get there, so that we get to software is built by groups of people who represent the groups of people that need it.